and welcome to this performance of the Senior Troupe of Lifelong. We are thrilled to be on the stage of the Hangar, and we are thrilled that you were in the audience. So thank you. Yay! I'm Sue Perlgut, and I'm the director and sometimes performer with the troupe, as I am today.
The war lasted so very, very long. Then suddenly it was over. There were many faces missing, many oars lacked a rower after 10 years of war. But best of all, they were going home.
Travels in my life, starting as a young child, have taken me to many places, both here and abroad, many of them on ships. In 1953, my father, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, moved with our family to the States after having lived in Europe for 5 years. We took an Army ship in late summer. The seas were choppy, and thankfully the voyage was uneventful. I was 5 years old. When I was 10, after living in Addis Ababa for 3.5 years, our family left in June of 1958. We took Ethiopian Airlines from the capital. We were returning to the States after we planned a vacation in Europe. We flew to Rome on Alitalia Airlines, which was cramped and overcrowded. The heat was so oppressive that my mother decided we could not stay. We took a crowded bus to Athens on the Mediterranean Sea. It was nightfall when we reached the city. The hotel that we were booked at lost our reservations, so we took a taxi and went to several hotels before we could find a vacancy. We got there
Late at night.
The next morning, we found out we had the same suitcase as an Orthodox priest. He had our suitcase and we had his. That whole day, my father and brother spent trekking up a hill to the monastery to get our suitcase back. Finally, they both came back exhausted. The next day, we visited the Parthenon and the Acropolis. It was hot. After 2 days, we left Greece for France. From a stint in France, we took a French ocean liner to New York City. In June 1966, my brother and I had just finished our freshman and sophomore years in college in the States and traveled home to Germany where my father was stationed. We went on a naval ship which was full of college students going to see their parents in Germany. To pass the time, we played cards and shuffleboard, and there were dances and entertainment. It was smooth sailing, and we had lots of fun. In 1967, my father was assigned to Cornell ROTC as an instructor, which is how I came to Ithaca, where I finished my education at Ithaca College. I stayed here when my father and mother eventually retired in France.
One thing there was in plenty: wine. Wine looted from the Trojan cellars. But as for food, there was not a bite left. Odysseus allowed his men to drink the wine to raise their spirits, and they immediately rolled into helpless drunkenness. The boats drifted for want of rowing.
Many people can say from the age of X, I wanted to be X, and then became that.
I wanted to be a bus driver.
I wanted to be an interior decorator.
I wanted to be a veterinarian.
I never knew what I wanted to be, but at age 8, I knew where I wanted to be. I guess I can say that my Odyssey began then, when I was in 4th grade, and my mother took me from Buffalo, New York to Babylon, Long Island, to help my sister who was recovering from a second cesarean. From her home, we went to live with a family in Manhasset, where the mother was in rehab. My mother took care of the children. I enrolled in school. Now, not only did Long Island have 5 TV channels to Buffalo's one, but the cast of the show, Song of the South, came and performed at our school assembly.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay.
Imagine that at PS 43 in Buffalo, New York. Then there was the view from the elevated train into Manhattan of clusters of huge buildings with laundry flapping on lines stretched from one building to another. Exactly why that bewitched me, I really don't know. But the vision spoke of hundreds of people, and I wanted to dive into that sea of humanity. So at age 8, I vowed I would.
And she did.
At 19, I drove to New York City. But on the way, driving through central New York, as my family had done so often to visit my brothers at Sampson Air Force Base, I fell in love with Lake Cayuga, and I vowed that I would return here someday. Then in New York City, I got an apartment on the fringes of Greenwich Village, took a clerical job at Dell Publishing, and settled into life in the big city. I hung out at Cafe Figaro, discussing existentialism with my bohemian friends. I went to the Metropolitan Park, and the Museum of Modern Art, and got drunk at the White Horse, where Dylan Thomas did the same.
I was there too, Carol. You look familiar. Maybe we got drunk at the same time.
I went to galleries, I rode buses and subways, and exulted in being a New Yorker. Eventually, though, I began to feel the pull of my rural roots and joined an ex-flame back in Buffalo, New York for a while. When that relationship fizzled, I went back to the city. I got a job at NYU, finished my BA, and worked at the Department of Social Services. Then, after a stint in the Midwest, where when you order spaghetti and meatballs, what you get is
Egg noodles in tomato paste.
And wieners.
and all the people were white Nordic Lutheran. I needed the diversity of my home state. Back to Buffalo for a while, and then back to New York City, this time forever for a while, until Lake Cayuga began to fall. So here I am, halfway between my family in Buffalo and my friends in the city. I've settled apparently on my last stop, but then, who knows?
At first, it was just a dazzle on the horizon, a flash too bright for eyes. Then they began to make out its shape. Land, cried the lookout. No, a ship, surely. An island, a city. King Iolo was hungry for news of Troy and its heroes. To satisfy the endless curiosity of the king, he had to recount all his exploits of bravery in the wars and all his adventures since leaving Ithaca.
It was 1962 when three of us, who were all students attending Syracuse University, decided to hitchhike to Ithaca to see a Joan Baez concert to be held at Cornell University in Barton Hall. Only one of us had been to Ithaca before, which was a good thing, as she knew her way to Ithaca. At the time, none of us had a car, so we all hitchhiked. Early that morning on Route 11. There was no Route 13 then at that time. Then I had no idea I would eventually end up living in Ithaca. After the evening concert, which was fantastic, we had no place to sleep, so we decided to settle in the woods somewhere on campus.
We were college students.
Next morning, totally exhausted but happy, we hitchhiked back to Syracuse. I lived that story for the rest of my days at Syracuse University. Years later, when I was living in Nyack, New York, about once a year, my then wife and I would drive to Ithaca to visit her brother Wesley, who was attending Cornell University as an undergraduate. After several visits to Ithaca, we decided we loved the Finger Lakes area so much we moved here. We rented a house for the first year near Sapsucker Woods, and then eventually bought a house of our own in Etna, New York. It had a pool and a cemetery. That didn't bother me, and luckily I saw no ghosts. 20 years have passed since that Joan Baez concert. In Ithaca had many jobs over the years. Piano tuner technician, New York State electric and gas salesperson for natural gas, real estate agent, assistant volunteer coordinator for suicide prevention, and after 3 years commute of 3 hours to Scranton, Pennsylvania, I became a clinical social worker and worked as a therapist. After I met my second wife, Sue, we decided to stay at Ithaca until my daughter, Sarah, graduated from high school. Sarah has been gone from the area for 24 years, having many of her own journeys, but we're still here. I hear the sirens call of Ithaca and I listen.
Odysseus was in a quandary. His men were exhausted, his ship in tatters. Out there beyond Circe's magic garden, the god Poseidon sat seething in his watery bed. Even so, Ithaca was waiting. "I insist, madam," Odysseus demanded of Circe, "that you tell me how I must reach Ithaca." "I can't," she replied. "The gods have forbidden me to help you."
I can't imagine living anywhere but New York City. I would say that to myself over and over.
I can't imagine living anywhere but New York
I
City.
can't imagine living anywhere but New York
can't
City.
imagine living anywhere but New York City.
It was the mid-70s, and I had been living in New York City for 7 years, having moved there from only 45 miles away, but it was a world of difference. That all changed in the early 80s, when my then partner was accepted to Cornell University Law School as an older student. We spent the first year commuting between New York City and Ithaca to see each other, and then I realized I missed trees and grass and space, so in 1982, I moved to Ithaca. While living in New York City, I jumped feet first into the second wave women's movement and identified as a radical feminist, believing anywhere I went, I would bring my views and my beliefs, and that would be fine. In New York City, I started a feminist troupe and owned a feminist bookstore.
She was committed.
When I first moved to Ithaca, leaving behind my beloved New York City, I moved into a collective house and proceeded to look for work. I was surprised to find that there wasn't much work for me here in Ithaca. I looked around and I finally landed a job as the director of the Head Start at a nearby rural community. My friends in Ithaca were concerned, and I didn't understand why until I was interviewed by the superintendent of schools, who told me that the locals referred to Ithaca as the city, where I referred to New York City as
The city.
I probably should have listened closer to that comment. I took the job. It was the first in a long line of jobs where my radical politics, my feminism, and my beliefs conflicted with upstate New York conservatism. As in the Odyssey, Circe was setting me up with all kinds of barriers and tests before I could become my true self here. One of the first tests came when I took the parents of the children of my Head Start program on a buying trip to Smedley's bookstore, a feminist bookstore in downtown Ithaca. It seemed like a reasonable trip to me. One of the books we bought was Our Bodies Ourselves. It was for the parents' library. Next thing I knew, I was told that the book was being taken off the shelf. Nobody would tell me why. So I could only assume it was because it talked about lesbianism and women's sexuality. Luckily for me, the Head Start program in Tompkins County held county-wide meetings of all the Head Start programs from other municipalities. When those directors heard about the book being banned, it became a very popular book. I only lasted in that job for 1 year. I've now lived in Ithaca for almost 40 years, had many jobs, overcame many hurdles, And now I can finally say that I have come home to a community and relationship that I love and work that gives me joy, meaning, expresses my creativity, and adds good to the world. There was no Penelope waiting for me with open arms at the end of this journey, just myself.
High in the window of the palace, Penelope, queen of Ithaca and wife of Odysseus, looked out across the wave-striped ocean. A dark shape caught her eye. Odysseus, Odysseus, but it was only the shadow of a scudding cloud and not a ship at all.
My car was having problems, and I had to use it to go far, far away. At least it felt like far, far away. This is one of two journeys involving risk. I'll get to the other one later. For this journey, I was driving 180 miles through endless farmland. I was going to drive from Lawrence, Kansas to Winfield, Kansas to attend the annual Walnut Valley Festival, a long weekend of mostly bluegrass and old-time string band music. And for the record, I was there to see Alison Krauss win the Kansas State Fiddling Championship. Back to my car, which, after I drove any distance and then shut it off, it would not start if I let it sit for more than 45 minutes. And if it didn't start, I wouldn't know how long I needed to wait until it finally started again. So I headed down to Winfield, willing to take the chance that I could get stranded somewhere in the Kansas outback. This meant that when I stopped at a highway McDonald's, I had to
Order, eat, go to the bathroom.
while making sure that I got back to the car within 45 minutes. From time to time, I entertained the thought I might lose track of time, but it was just a thought, not a worry or dread. I had more than faith.
She had confidence.
I made it to Winfield. Another journey I had was to night school. This trip was only a mile and on a New York City bus. I was taking a music appreciation course at Columbia University's School of Continuing Education. It was late fall and already dark when class started at 6 o'clock. As I've mentioned, I lived about a mile south of the school, and there was a bus that went straight up Broadway to its entrance. One evening I was waiting for the bus, and it wasn't coming as soon as I would have liked. I wasn't really nervous about being late. I just wanted the bus to come.
Where is that bus? When is it coming? Where is it?
Finally, a bus came, but it wasn't the right one. Although I was 20 and should have known better, I thought, this bus is going north, and I'm going north, so why don't I take it? I took it and ended up on the other side of the park from where Columbia was. I was uncomfortable being in an unfamiliar part of town, and particularly weary about walking through a deserted park after dark, but that's what I had to do. I walked, watchful and nervous, and with no scary encounters, I made it to school. So, with regard to the two journeys, with the risks that I have just described, I ask you, would you rather be stuck in a roadside McDonald's for an unknown period of time, or mugged in a New York City park?
Look, look, my sisters, see his twining curls. Hey, snare to snare the hearts of we poor girls. Oh, piteous who love you, glorious man. Put in now, swim now, jump down. Come, you can.
The red-powered boat swept down the past island. The sweet song of the silence became indistinct and sobbing.
It was my 6th birthday. I eagerly tore off the wrapping paper of the largest gift, wondering what could it be. My dad had given me a large green chalkboard, complete with writing chalk and eraser. It was my favorite gift. I played school with that chalkboard all summer long, practicing math problems, spelling, the Palmer script lesson. By August, I knew that I wanted to be
A teacher.
Each year, I modified my career goals. I was going to teach reading to second graders, like Miss Fava. Then I was going to be a fifth grade teacher, like Mrs. Burns, and teach American history. In sixth grade, I finally had it figured out. I was going to teach violin, like Miss Forno. But in seventh grade, my dreams took a drastic detour. The call of the sirens beckoned me to an exotic land where people spoke a different language and lived a different culture. Spain was my new destination.
Hola, senora.
And so, newly graduated from SUNY Albany and Middlebury College in 1971, I landed my first job teaching Spanish in Cohoes, New York. 4 years later, I started a Spanish program in Watkins Glen and even traveled to Spain with my students one spring vacation. Technology in the classroom was changing rapidly. We videotaped our wacky skits with oversized cameras and watched our very own reruns on TV. Like Penelope, I had been biding my time, and I was waiting patiently for something
More challenging.
It was time to take the risk and apply to a new school district. Employed by the Ithaca City School District from 1983 to 2006, I ultimately taught every level Spanish class from 7th grade to Spanish 5. I had learned Spanish through the bilingual method. ¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
Now I was teaching in a different way. I implemented
The Gold Star Club.
a motivational technique I learned from Mrs. Burns. Each class had a poster which displayed gold stars for A quality work. The gold strips were cut at the end of the semester and given out as prizes. All students received gold stars. I also created Dining with Toomey. Students would come to me during their lunch period to reflect on their behavior in class. With grant money, my Spanish 5 students and I built a portable puppet theater to teach Spanish to preschoolers each week.
Buenos días.
¿Cómo están? And my Spanish 4 students were dispersed widely throughout the district to tutor at nearby elementary schools. In 2006, I retired from Ithaca High School, thinking that my teaching journey had ended.
Wrong.
I unretired and started a course for Ithaca College, where I taught for 12 more years. I retired in 2021.
Finalmente.
Had 50 years really passed that quickly since my first teaching job in Cohoes? I had come full circle in my journey. It was never really about the subject matter at all. It was about taking detours and risks, accepting new challenges, but most of all, making connections with students.
It was June 1957, and I was returning to America after spending my junior year of college in Beirut, Lebanon. With me on the trip were 3 of my American classmates, Alan, Karen, and Larry. Being low on funds, we decided to travel deck class for the journey from Beirut to Naples on the good ship Achilles. This meant spending 3 nights sleeping on a hard wooden deck, along with a noisy throng of other travelers. We had to move fast in order to claim space for ourselves, so we spread out our sleeping bags and formed a wall around them with our bags and knapsacks. Passengers traveling deck class were not eligible for meals, so we packed bread, cheese, and fruit. The one shared bathroom was beyond description, with urine running out under the doors and even worse smells within. Needless to say, we awoke the next morning with aching backs and a realization that we might have been a bit reckless about our travel plans. When the captain announced that the ship would dock at Alexandria the next night, and that anyone who chose to would be allowed to go ashore, we cried, "Alhamdulillah, praise to God, a real bed for the night." The only requirement was that we leave our passports with the purser, which we were only too happy to do. It was dark when the Achilles finally docked, and the four of us were the only passengers to go ashore. Filled with a sense of adventure, we plunged into the eerily silent and deserted city on foot, blissfully unaware of potential danger. Suddenly a horse and cart pulled up beside us, and Alan, who spoke some Arabic, asked the driver to take us to a good hotel and gave him an American dollar. Well, the moment that dollar appeared, a weaselly, scar-faced man materialized out of nowhere and bought the dollar bill. Since he continued to trot along beside us, I got a good look at his face. Slitty little eyes, missing teeth, and an ugly scar that slashed his face from chin to hairline. His oily black hair was slicked straight back over his scalp, and the smile he gave me curdled my blood. He told us in broken English, laced with curse words, that he knew a good restaurant close by and pointed the way. It turned out to be what in America we would call a hole in the wall, a tiny room with 3 rickety tables. We ordered soup, usually the safest choice, and ate quickly. Our creepy companion sat at another table, keeping an eye on us. When we finished eating, he led us to a conveniently located hotel around the corner. It seemed clean enough, and the man at the desk spoke a little English. Scarface prattled on about the wonders of Alexandria as he accompanied us to our adjoining rooms. "To make sure you are safe," he told us. We locked our doors, fell into bed, and slept soundly. At 6 the next morning, we were awakened by Larry pounding on our door. "Ellen's money was stolen," he cried. "He phoned the police and he's barricading the front door to keep anyone from leaving the hotel till the police arrive." Hearts pounding, we dressed and hurried downstairs. By then, the chief of police had arrived and stationed men throughout the hotel. Pandemonium reigned as frightened guests scurried around us. My mind swirled with questions. Will we make it back to the ship in time? We have no passports. We could be stuck in this hellhole for days, months. I felt like Odysseus, hovering at the edge of Charybdis, on the verge of being swallowed up by the dreaded whirlpool. Suddenly there appeared at the door 2 Egyptian policemen of monolithic proportions, dressed in long robes and tasseled fezzes, and between them, squirming like a fractious monkey, was none other than our old friend Scarface. It soon became clear that he had been in cahoots with someone on the hotel staff who had slipped him a key to the boys' room. Unfortunately for Alan, however, his money was long gone. After signing a mountain of official forms, we were treated to breakfast by the vice consul of the American embassy and driven in a limousine to the ship minutes before it departed for Athens. It seemed that we might, if we kept our wits about us, reach the shores of our homeland after all.
"You are found out, madam. You are as cunning as that dead husband of yours, the wily old Odysseus. Well, the game is over. The veil is finished. Today's the day you will choose a husband. So you better take a good look at each of us. Do your worst," called Penelope. "I am Penelope, daughter of Icarus and wife of Odysseus." When Odysseus woke, lying on the heap of embroidered garments, he could not help but remember where he was. The shape of the mountain that towered over him was somehow familiar. He was home in Ithaca.
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 Ithaca.